Would you like a super fast, easy idea for using 12 by 12 pattern paper to make cards without scraps? Hi, I'm Jess from jesscrafts.com, and I'm here to help you make the most of your crafty supplies and time. So let's get making. Today I have 12 by 12 paper busting template for 5 by 7 cards number 3. So we're going to make 4 5 by 7 cards with 1 piece of 12 by 12 patterned paper and no patterned paper scraps. This template is available in a pack of 10 or 20 in the Etsy shop so that you can print it off, but the measurements are really simple, so you can just follow along, write down the measurements for future reference. So basically, we are going to start with our 12 by 12 piece of paper, and we are going to cut it into 3 by 12 inch strips. So when using tools like paper trimmers, please follow all manufacturer safety instructions. I have the Echo Park Paper Play All Day Boy. I think I bought this a number of years ago, but I feel like there's always similar collections out there with like sports themes. My pattern paper has a whole bunch of sports on the front and this sort of orange, kind of like star extended hashtag, I don't know, like little hashes on the back. But anyway, very simple on one side and then very sports themed on the other. I figured this would be great for donating because I donate to organizations that serve children. Lots of children love to play sports. And even if I were donating to like adults, I think, it could work well. Plenty of people love a sports themed card. Okay, and then you take this 3 by 12 inch piece and you're gonna cut 5 inches off it. So 12 minus 5 is 7. So I measured to the 7 inch mark. And now I have the 2 pieces of paper that I need for my card, and that's it. Like, those are the only 2 pieces each card needs. I'll repeat that, sort them out into my trays because that's what I like to do. And I will also cut some mats, but I don't even think you would have to, especially with this particular patterned paper, because neither background is white. If I placed it directly onto my card, and also, if your card base isn't white, then you don't have to worry about the white thing, but often when you work with white card bases, I will link a source in the video description where I bought a whole bunch of 5 by 7 cards. Actually, sorry, I will link you to Amazon. I did not purchase them on Amazon. It's the same company, but I purchased it from a different website. But just in case you were looking for a source for a lot of 5 by 7 cards, to buy them in bulk, I mean. Okay, so anyway, my background is white. So if my pattern paper had a white background, I would definitely want to put a mat on it. But in this case, as you could see, I could easily skip the mat and make very fast cards. This would be particularly great, especially I'm thinking like the sports theme, right? If you need to just whip up a bunch of thank you cards or something that you need a bunch of, you could make 4 from each pattern paper. The sketch does call for mats, so let's just briefly talk about those measurements. So I had 2 pieces. One was 3 by 7 inches and one was 3 by 5 inches. Now 7 inches is the full length of the card. So my mat is only going to be a 1/4 inch bigger in the width. So it's going to be 3 1/4 by 7 inches. And then my mat for the focal panel is going to be a 1/4 inch bigger on both sides. So 3 1/4 by 5 1/4. A bit of a dilemma is that these are kind of hard measurements to cut effectively out of 8.5 by 11 paper. So you are going to be left with a lot of cardstock scraps. I honestly do not worry too much about that because I just pull my scraps first when I go to make mats for future cards. So in this particular case, I cut the 8.5 side down to 7 and then the 11 inch side down to 9 3/4 because that's 3 1/4 times 3. And then measuring 3 3/4, 3 1/4 each time. So I have those 3 mats I need for my background. I am gonna go look here at my previous scraps and think, oh, I might be able to get something out of those. I do need one more 7 inch piece. So this time I'm gonna cut it to 3 1/4 by 8.5 and then that down to 7. So now I need to get my 3 1/4 by 5 1/4 mats. I think this, yeah, so that's 3 1/4 and it's by 6 1/4. So I'll just trim it down to 5 1/4 so that I'm using a scrap, and I should be able to, I'm trying to I don't think I can cut 3 out of this. So I'll probably have to pull out another full sheet of paper, but again, those scraps can be used for so many things. I'm not too worried about it. In case you're curious, because I don't show this in every video, when I approach a card like this, or like a set of cards like this, especially because there's not a lot of pieces, so therefore not a lot of things to get mixed up, I will do a lot of like more of an assembly line approach where I'm gonna tape all of these 3x5 pieces to their backgrounds. Then I'm going to tape all of the 3x7 pieces to their background, and then tape all the 3x7 pieces to the card base, and then each of the 3x5 to the card, and just kind of like do the same step over and over again. Although something I'm gonna stop and do here is I want to stamp a sentiment that coordinates, and right now I'm covering a lot of cardstock. And so it would be better to be cutting some kind of shape out of this. And for at the very least today, I want to cut a banner die out of some of these or some of these so that I can use my sentiment. I am planning on using a pretty pink Posh stamp set. I've lost my backer sheet for it. But let's see. It has like a bunch of different, it's called Sports, and it has, you know, different sports equipment and the trophy and the ribbon and all that, and some really great encouraging sentiments. There are sports themed jokes for free download at jesscrafts.com, so I will link those in the video description as well. I'm ready to stamp my sentiment. I'm going to keep it simple and use black ink because I have no particular reason to, like, there's going to be other black on the card. And I think I'm just gonna use the You're a Winner. I think they're all really like, way to go champ, you're an all-star, you're #1. They're all great. I like that they're like, can be an encouraging sentiment, but also a sort of thank you sentiment possibly as well. I think it gives a little versatility to the set. I cut the little banner dies out of the background cardstock like I mentioned. However, sometimes with little ones like this, they tend to slip around on the mat when I'm stamping with just a stamp block. So taping them down in some way can be pretty helpful. I'll use this in my Misty as well, but basically I die cut my favorite sentiment strips and I put tape behind it so the sticky side is facing up, so you see how it sticks to me. And so it's holding down my sentiment strip so that I have to worry less about it shifting. These also, because my die cut machine mat is a little old, sometimes it curls up my die cuts a little bit, which, you know, they could just bend back into shape, no problem. But again, it adds a little bit of challenge to the stamping. So I'm going to stamp my sentiment on the left-hand side of this banner because I think I will put it to the right-hand side of the panel. Like that. Hopefully I'm not confusing my directions here, and so it'll like hang off and just be a partial banner. I could stamp it in the center because this does fit well onto the focal point piece, so whatever works out well for your particular design. And then I'll just be able to add the next one right on to the template, stamp another one. And I'm using black VersaFine ink because it's a pigment ink, so it will dry, but it will give me a really crisp, easy impression. I don't have to worry about whether it's Copic safe because I'm just stamping a sentiment. When assembling these cards, I am going into my scrap pile that I just created and cutting myself some little pieces of cardstock that will prop up my panels, just because here I use thick cardstock because I like to use the same cardstock for die cutting, layering, everything. And so it gives it a little bit cleaner and flatter of a look to put that little extra scrap of cardstock behind there. And so it's a way that I'm using up my scraps. And then that like completes the basic design of the card. But I want to talk a little bit about how I'm going to embellish. I mentioned I'm going to use the You're a Winner sentiment. And then I have decided to color some soccer balls or footballs for the rest of the world. Soccer seems pretty popular here, especially with young kids, and I know it's popular globally, so I thought, why not? They're very easy to color, which is another plus here. So I'm going to talk briefly about how I color these. Okay, I've zoomed in, and as you can see, I went right outside the lines. I did stamp this in a Copic Safe ink from YTFAN, and then I started by taking a light gray marker, in this case a C1 Copic marker. This is just basic alcohol marker coloring, so you might have a different brand of alcohol marker that would work similarly. Then, after I gave it an overall coat of C1, which will basically be my white areas, I did come through and add a shadow in the corner of the ball. I just picked like one side of the ball just to add a little bit of interest and dimension without having to go into too much detail. And then I'll blend that out a little bit with the other lighter gray. So I used a C1 and a C3. I am going to use my scissors to fussy cut this out, i.e. I'm going to cut right along the black line on the edge, and so it's okay if I color outside the lines. However, for the black, I'm actually going to use a C100. I very rarely use a C100 for black, but when I think of a soccer ball, it's a very like defined color. There's not necessarily a lot of shadows on the individual aspects of the ball. There's going to be a shadow on the overall ball, which is what I already just added. And then the black should look crisp and shiny. So I am going to very carefully just color in the center black and the edges, but I'm not going to go outside the lines as much as possible here on the edge because this is such a dark black. It would cover the line and I might not see where I want to cut out, so I am going to have to be a little bit more fussy in that step. But this is going to be tricky because talking, getting the right angle with the camera, and getting perfectly inside the lines, you know, it's a challenge to do all of that at once, but I'll give it a go here. I probably just moved it up. No, luckily. Luckily I can see what I'm filming as I'm filming generally, so that helps me to at least know when I've brought something outside the camera. But I stamped and colored just a whole bunch of these because I thought, well, you know, for me, I like having extras. I stamped an extra sentiment too, in case something goes wrong. I mentioned that a few times. I don't mind having extra for future cards. I'm like, you know, once I'm here, once I pulled out the colors, all of that. So I will use, I think I'm probably gonna use 3 on each card though. So I am gonna use up a lot of these, but we'll see how it goes when we start trying to actually lay everything out. So now I have my completed card. And I want to talk a little bit about how I made some of the design decisions to complete the card. First off, because I fussy cut out my stamps, I did take a black brush tip marker because I stamped in black ink, and I ran that along the edges of the fussy cut images just to make sure that that had a consistent look. Any inconsistencies were addressed by that. I've talked about that tip a number of times. And then I created a visual triangle with my 3 soccer ball images. So, because things tend to look good in odd groupings of 1, 3, 5, in this case 3, and then adding it as a visual triangle so that I know where to place it. Sometimes you can include your sentiment in your odd number or in your visual triangle. I put my sentiment down here on the bottom right hand corner because we do tend to scan from top to bottom when we read in English, and that's, you know, the language my card is in. And so then it kind of tells you, okay, now you're finished, and move on to the inside of the card. And then one last design decision I made here was to pop up just this one soccer ball and leave the other 2 glued flat to the card just for a little bit more interest. It is also why, this is I guess another thing, I put one of the soccer balls not in the group, so it kind of looked like they had a bit of movement to them. Another thing you might consider is I did color all my soccer balls the same way with a black spot in the center, but you could have shifted where your black spot was so all the soccer balls didn't look like they were facing in the same direction. And that might add some visual interest as well, but I did kind of the easy thing of coloring them all the same way. I plan to finish all 3 of the other cards the same way. Like I said, I colored many of the soccer ball image, but I think that you could certainly mix up your cards by coloring different images for each one, using stickers or die cut images that are pre-printed to make things even faster with these really simple cards. But you don't have to always create everything the same way. As I mentioned, there are some sports themed jokes on jesscrafts.com in case you will find those helpful anyway, or you have the same paper in your stash or something like that. If you found this video helpful, here's another video where you can find more ideas for enjoying your crafty time and supplies. Let me know you like this video with a share to your crafty community, subscribe and click the bell so you don't miss the next template or tutorial, and check the video description for product links. See you in the next video.